What if the most influential breakup in rock history never happened? What if Roger Waters never left Pink Floyd in 1985, and the band that once defined alienation, empathy, and dissent continued speaking to the world with one unified voice? From a cultural historian's perspective, Pink Floyd was never just a band. It was a mirror held up to modernity, reflecting war trauma, authoritarianism, isolation, and the psychological cost of power. Waters' departure marked more than an artistic split. It symbolized the fragmentation of conscience from spectacle. In this alternate reality, music lovers later argue that keeping Waters within Pink Floyd preserved a rare equilibrium. David Gilmour's sonic transcendence balanced by Waters' moral gravity. The band remains not only musically innovative, but ethically unsettling, forcing listeners to feel, not just escape. In this timeline, the internal conflict of the mid-1980s does not end at separation. Instead, Pink Floyd enters a tense but productive detente. Waters retains lyrical control, while the band collectively reigns in excesses of ego. The result is not comfort, but creative friction. Albums released in the late 1980s and 1990s are darker, leaner, and more politically incisive than in our world. Children of the Aftermath becomes the album that defines an era. Released at a moment when the world is grappling with post-Cold War disillusionment, inherited trauma, and the quiet anxieties of late modernity, it resonates across generations. The album does not rage against authority alone. It mourns what children inherit when systems fail, wars they did not start, fears they did not choose, and identities shaped by absence. Critics immediately recognize it as a conceptual equal to The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, but with a broader emotional reach. Commercially, it shatters records, dominating charts across continents while selling out stadiums and intimate halls alike. Culturally, it becomes a reference point in classrooms, protest movements, and personal lives, quoted not just for its sound, but for its empathy. Like its predecessors, Children of the Aftermath stops being an album and becomes a language, one through which an entire generation learns to articulate loss, responsibility, and fragile hope. Waters' greatest strength, his ability to articulate collective trauma, never leaves the band. Pink Floyd continues to confront war, nationalism, surveillance, and consumerism, but now addresses emerging anxieties, neoliberal alienation, post-Cold War disillusionment, and the quiet loneliness of digital life. Their music evolves from grand rock operas into stark, emotionally demanding works that challenge audiences rather than soothe them. Unlike much of mainstream rock's retreat into irony or escapism, Pink Floyd remains earnest, almost uncomfortable in its sincerity. Waters' presence ensures that empathy stays central. Songs do not merely describe suffering, they demand moral reflection. The band refuses neutrality. This choice limits commercial saturation, but deepens cultural impact. The influence on later generations is profound. Alternative and progressive artists in the 1990s and 2000s inherit not just Floyd's soundscapes, but its ethical ambition. Music becomes a space for vulnerability again. Protest songs return, not as slogans, but as psychological explorations of fear, guilt, and responsibility. Artists feel permitted to be serious, political, and emotionally raw without irony. Culturally, this Pink Floyd shapes listeners differently. Their continued prominence in a post-Cold War world encourages introspection at a time of triumphalism. Young audiences raised on their music develop a vocabulary for empathy toward victims of war, toward the mentally unwell, toward those crushed by systems larger than themselves. Sensitivity is not dismissed as weakness. It is framed as awareness. Waters' absence in our timeline left a void. Critique without poetry, anger without collective voice. In this alternate reality, his strengths are amplified by collaboration. His sharpness is tempered by melody, his polemics softened by atmosphere. Pink Floyd remains a space where rage and compassion coexist, where critique is humanized rather than weaponized. The band's longevity also alters rock's aging process. Instead of nostalgia acts, Pink Floyd becomes an evolving moral institution, less prolific but consistently relevant. Their later albums are debated, resisted, and sometimes rejected, but never ignored. They refuse to become background music for consumption. History remembers this version of Pink Floyd not as a band that fractured under pressure, but as one that endured it, choosing discomfort over dissolution. And the final question lingers. If Roger Waters had never left Pink Floyd, would popular music have remained a place for empathy and moral reckoning? Or was the world already turning away from listening? Put your thoughts in comments.
Like, comment, share and subscribe.